What would you say the main emphasis was during the 2011 session, Bob?
Really, I think the emphasis was on education. It was billed as an education session going into the legislature, and really, if you were to count up the debate, the hours, a lot of the discussion truly was around education, what to do with the Hathaway curriculum, what to do with things that would measure teacher performance and education performance. That was the big thing. That was maybe the main substantive thing they did. And of course, there was this underlying theme of some conservative issues this year as well.
Going back to talk about some of those issues, the Hathaway, were there any changes to the requirements made?
Nothing that they could agree on. They lost that bill about the last week. The Senate had a different idea than the House. I think what you'll see in the future is a discussion on whether or not we should have foreign language be a requirement for a couple of years for students. That was something the House and the Senate certainly disagreed on. So there's just some nuts and bolts issues. They did kill the bill, and then they realized, oh, wait a minute, we have to come back and fix it, because if we don't have the bill in, we'll run out of money and there'll be no more Hathaway scholarships. So that was one funny conversation they had in the last 2 days of the session that they had to fix. On the teacher tenure issue, they killed that bill, but they did come back and come up with maybe something that's really, when you think about it, amazing they don't have right now, where you would measure student performance against teacher performance and then against school performances in a particular school district. That'll be a work in progress. They've got some things to do there, but we've always had a local control state, and so this obviously is a sign that that has changed.
And the concern is because we're spending an awful lot of money on education, and we're not seeing the return on the test scores that we want for that?
That's correct. We have a high dropout rate for a state our size. That's a huge concern. I think we have about an 80% graduation rate, which in a place like Wyoming, people think would be should be higher than that. Some of our ACT scores are not where folks would like them to be. And then when they've done other measurements under No Child Left Behind and some other things, students have not done as well as people would like. So, is that the teacher's fault? Is it the student's fault? Is it the curriculum fault? It's probably a combination of all of that. And so now they're going to find a way to measure that, and then maybe ding some of the districts or schools if things aren't going well. I think there was a point in the session where the focus was probably too much on the teachers. Some people identified that and then backed away, and it's now a broader approach.
In terms of the tenure?
That's correct.
We don't know at this point what education reform is going to look like. Committees will be set up to do this?
I would say that what you will see, and there's committees that are going to iron out the nuts and bolts on this, but what you will see is you're going to see testing that is going to be, pause right now seems to be useless to a lot of teachers when you talk to them. They get the results the next school year after the kid has left. I think the approach some would like is that you're testing throughout the year. What can you do to make a test like PAWS mean something to students? Is it tied into grades? Is it tied into your ability to get through a class? And then what do you do about those other areas? For instance, you have choir teachers. How do you measure them? A choir teacher actually called me up during the session and asked me that, and I suggested they win a couple of Grammys. I was joking. I don't think they thought I was funny, but that is actually the problem, is that they don't have measurements for PE. They don't have measurements for a number of things. If you just teach something like a business class, they don't have a measurement for that. And so they need to expand that, and that's what a committee will be working on. And then you'll say, well, where do the students need to fit into all of this?
So you'd call this the education reform starter?
I think so. I think they really made significant progress in that area. And like I said, Mary, it's fascinating that we focus so much on the funding issue 10, 12 years ago as a state, but really never got to this point. And again, it's because local school districts have always been allowed to, I guess, run their own show. There were some minor graduation requirements that the state wanted, but for the most part, it was always up to local districts to have their own measurements, to decide how well they thought their students were doing. And I think you saw in both the superintendent's race and in the gubernatorial race, as well as some legislative races this last year, that there were folks that wanted that to change.
Nationally, our big concern might be the economy. Were there any promising things coming out of this session here that would help our economy?
I thought there was probably two. One, there's a manufacturing, you delay a tax on manufacturing. I thought that's something that has had some proven success. There's a wind turbine facility that's going to be building some of these towers that you put wind turbines on, and that was something that that came to Wyoming just simply because of that tax, and so they've gone ahead and lifted that tax break. The other one was one that deals with data centers, and that is going to be another incentive to try and delay taxes for software and the kinds of things that you put in data centers. Those in that industry tell me that that was a very important thing for Wyoming to pass. And I've done some stories in the last 2 years about these high-tech businesses that were growing out of the incubator in Laramie and some other places. The number one thing those people who are running those outfits are saying is we don't have enough data centers. And so if you can recruit these types of things where they can use the high-tech computers and that sort of thing, it does sound like there's an opportunity for a lot of economic growth. So those two things certainly, I think, do look promising. Laramie, Cheyenne also could be leveraging some bigger data centers, and so there's some excitement in both of those communities.
Do you think that the governor was happy with the outcome of this session?
He said he was. People lie to me, but I think that he seemed to be, for the most part, happy that some things did go away that he would rather just not have dealt with this year. But I think he's happy, again, going back to the education issue. I think he's happy that they've got about $1 billion or so in reserve in the legislature. So, yeah, I think they were happy, and he was pleased. Although I talked to him actually this week as we're talking, and he still was a little stressed.
What were some of those things that he was happy went away?
I think you could probably guess that he was happy he didn't have to deal with the gay marriage issue. I think you could probably suspect he was glad he didn't have to deal with the abortion issue. Did sign the concealed carry gun bill and said that he was happy with that. There were people that wondered what he might do with that bill, but he had absolutely no problem with it. And I think for the most part, he thought it was a good session from what he has said to us. It was, if you take away the social issue debate, actually there wasn't a lot of mean-spirited discussion for the most part. It's just those things kind of changed the tone.
Bob Beck, News Director for Wyoming Public Radio. I always appreciate your visiting us.
Thank you.